the next few minutes, but we'll go ahead and get started today. Welcome to everyone. My name is Dwayne Brzeziak. I'm the Executive Director for the Michigan chapter of NASW, and I've been helping coordinate some of these student series over the last few months. So you may have seen me if you've been on any of these other ones. We're so happy to have you all on here tonight to talk about clinical job hunting. We know that landscape has shifted quite a bit over the last couple of years, and it's the primary area for many of our folks in social work. So we wanted to set you all up with some best practices, some conversations that we're having in the field right now, give an opportunity for you to ask questions that you may be having as you either are entering the field, or for those of you who are in the field, maybe you can also provide some insight about what you're seeing. We've got two great panelists here today. Melissa Grudinsky, who is a 2016 MSW graduate from the University of New Hampshire. Melissa is a licensed independent clinical social worker and licensed drug and alcohol counselor in New Hampshire. She works as the Director of Clinical Services at PCS Counseling, a nonprofit outpatient mental health center. In her position, Melissa works in both clinical and administrative capacity, seeing a diverse caseload of adult and adolescent clients and supervising a staff of 21 clinicians. We also are joined by Lynn Stanley, who is the Executive Director of NASW New Hampshire and Vermont. Lynn has a clinical experience and a strong macro social work background. She spent 14 years with Casey Family Services, first as a clinical case manager, then providing technical assistance to foster and adoptive parents. In the last 6 years as a team leader for Casey's school-based Franklin Family Resource Center. Lynn was the lead for the New Hampshire After School Network, working to increase out-of-state learning opportunities for youth and closing the opportunity gap for lower-income youth. She's an adjunct faculty and teaching lecturer at the social work department at the University of New Hampshire. And Lynn earned her BA from New College of Florida and her MSW from the University of New Hampshire. So we're excited to have some East Coast represented on our panel today, but we know that some of you are on the far other coast. So we're really excited to have this national audience here. Welcome, Lynn and Melissa. We are so happy to have you here today. We will ask folks to please keep yourself muted. If you can, type your comments into the chat box, or you can use the raise your hand feature if you'd like to. I will be helping moderate and relay those comments to our presenters. We will also have a Google Drive with some resources for you all. I will drop that into the chat a couple of times throughout today's session. But with that, we'll turn it over to Lynn and Melissa.
Thank you, Dwayne. And I'm going to share my screen here. There we go. And Dwayne did such a good job of introducing us. I think we get to skip right over that part, don't we?
That's great, yeah.
Melissa. But thank you, Dwayne, for inviting us. And I'm going to move it to the next screen, maybe. There we go.
All right, perfect. So we will be able to answer any questions that we have, but here's just kind of an overview of some of the things that we'll be talking about today. So first and foremost, building your network and how to be successful and get connected with people in the field. We're going to go over how to obtain your dream job, interview skills or tips, and some of the benefits that you can look for in your interview process, some of the changes that we've had to navigate through and opportunities that have come from COVID, lots of changes, what's to do when you're hired, and then we'll answer questions after that.
Thank you. Okay, when thinking about building your network, and this kind of leads into that, how you find your dream job, but it really starts with your network, who you know. Indeed, and those job search engines are fantastic, but the reality is a lot of people still find their jobs because of who they're connected to, who they know, because somebody told them about a job opportunity, or you learned about an organization, an agency that you were really interested in. So first and foremost, I'm actually going to start with my bottom bullet, say yes. To quote Tina Fey, say yes, figure it out later. When you have opportunities presented to you, take them. Go to that meeting, sit in on that task force, get connected to the people who are within your internship, that your professors know, that other social workers or allied professionals know. And I recommend keeping a list, right? You may not get handed a business card on a Zoom meeting, but take notes. Find out who was in that meeting, where they work, and if you now have a connection that you can go back to. One thing that many of you have probably learned within your social work program or your internships or your jobs, people like talking about what they do. That's why I put down informational interviews. If you've gotten connected to somebody, ask, hey, it sounds like you have a really cool job. I'd love to learn more about what you do and how you got there. Can I set up an informational interview with you? People like talking about themselves. People like talking about what they do. And people very, very often like talking to students to give some pearls of wisdom. Conferences, committees, workshops, anywhere where you can be in a room, real or Zoom, is a way to get connected to other people. Oftentimes in workshops, there are small breakouts. It's a great way to get introduced to people and find out where they work. If you are interested in advocacy work, get connected to an advocacy coalition of whatever interests you. You are now connected to a whole bunch of other people who are like-minded and they have their own networks. You now become connected. It becomes the 6 degrees of separation about how you get connected to other people. Melissa, did you want to add on to this?
Yeah, I'm going to put a plug in for NASW. I will give you a little bit of context. So I started my MSW right after undergrad many years ago, and then different things came up. I paused. When I was when I initially was starting my program, the school that I was going to had said, you should check out NASW. It's wonderful. It's great. And I thought, okay, yep, that sounds good. But it wasn't until I actually really dove into my program several years later that I got involved with NASW. And there are just so many things that I credit NASW and my involvement with how the way in which my professional path has kind of gone. You're able to network within NASW. You can build connections to interest areas that you have. For me, when I was in grad school, I was interning in child protection, which was very interesting for me, but I really knew that I wanted to go into psychotherapy. And so I was able to get involved with the clinical committee. NASW allows you to stay in the know, keep your finger on the pulse of advocacy, legislative stuff, meeting other social workers, other new professionals. That has really been a major part of my recipe, the recipe for me and other folks in my agency that I've later hired, because NASW has provided me and other folks involved with just a little bit more awareness, a little bit more connectedness. So it's really, really been helpful. I think that that's one of the best ways of being able to build your network when it comes to the field.
Can I just add one quick thing in there too? So,
absolutely.
I appreciate folks dropping their LinkedIn profiles into the chat box too, because that's another way when you're in a meeting like this, that it's kind of a non-traditional way to stay connected after, because there's a bunch of people here, probably most of the people here you've never met before. You may never see in person, but that doesn't mean that we don't offer something to one another as colleagues, even across the country. And it's amazing, even kind of pre-COVID and when we were in virtual settings, I was able to meet people that only knew me through Twitter, which was very weird when you go to a conference and somebody only knows you through like a Twitter and you're like, oh, you're that person on the other end of that Twitter account. Ah, yes, we can build that together. And so LinkedIn is a platform, and I don't know if see we have that on this page here, so I won't go into that. But I also just mentioned the My NASW community too. And so for the student members who are on this call, you're automatically a part of that student community nationally. So check it out if you haven't already. There are thousands of people in there sharing resources, asking questions, and it's a really good way to at least see what some of the conversations are that are happening on a national level.
Thanks, Dwayne. So now the dream job, I think, connects really well to building your network, because finding your dream job might be about tapping into your network, talking to the people who maybe you heard something about in a presentation or a conference, or maybe somebody who's talked a little bit about their work in a committee that you're involved in. Being able to talk with your connections gives you a little bit more exposure to what's out there and what kinds of jobs you might be interested in. When I was in my MSW program, I was really interested in the agency that I work at now because of my supervisor at the time in a child protective agency did some part-time work at this agency. And so I thought, oh man, like I want to learn more about this. And while I was in grad school, there was an opening for an administrative assistant job. And so I just worked in the evenings. I checked clients in, I took a few phone calls, but that was how I was able to get more information, get more understanding to the agency. I was very interested in seeing how a psychotherapy practice worked because I hadn't had that kind of experience. So being able to say like, that sounds cool, I want to get more information about it. Certainly if you have opportunities, that was my say yes moment. My supervisor said, hey, are you looking for a part-time job? Okay, yes. And so being able to do that kind of exploration, and like what Lynn talked about, being able to do those informational interviews that will get you a little bit closer to finding what your dream job is. One of the other things that I think about from a hiring perspective, when we hire staff, and that includes both clinical staff members and administrative staff members, it helps to have a little bit of context or understanding about someone. Of course, employers are going to look at your resume, they're going to look at the you in the interview and what you bring to the table on paper and how you interview, but it also really helps to have a little bit of context from connections. So sometimes it's helpful just knowing like, oh, this is somebody, in fact, a social worker involved in NASW in our local chapter was looking for licensure opportunities, wanted to work with kids in a clinical setting. And Lynn said, hey, you should maybe talk to Melissa, see if she can give you any information. She's now working on her licensure here at our agency, which has been just really cool. So I think that that's a really important part of finding your dream job, just being able to tap into those connections from a hiring perspective. That's helpful on my end as well. Lynn, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure. And in this, the who has a cool job that you might like, or who works at a cool place, that's where some of those informational interviews come in, saying, hey, I met you in this meeting or at this workshop. I heard about your job. Could you just tell me a little bit more about it? And that way you've got a little bit more of an inside track. Remember, when somebody who works there knows you, then they can, oh yeah, I met them. They asked lots of great questions. They seemed really interested in the work that we do. it can't help but just give you a little bit of a leg up. Also, in thinking about Indeed, and you might put your resume up there, look at some of the, when you go into Indeed and you look at the jobs, look at some of the keywords that they use and then include those keywords in your resume. Because some of the bigger companies and the headhunters and people are like pulling out words, and they're, I don't know, computer excuse me, algorithms that figure this stuff out beyond my pay grade, but they're pulling out those keywords. With LinkedIn, another great way to build your network. You want to, send me a connection, or actually any of the executive directors for NASW, they'll probably connect with you. And most of the chapters also have their own LinkedIn pages. But it really is an interesting way to get connected to people, and you can apply for jobs there as well. Also, if you know the place where you would really like to work, sometimes the jobs are posted on Indeed or wherever, but going onto the agency website, they often have their jobs posted. And even if it's out of date, you don't know, they might have some other job posted there as well. And I do want to give just a heads up when you are applying for a job, even though it is against the NASW Code of Ethics to look at somebody's social media postings and scope them out, that doesn't mean that your potential employer won't. So take a moment to check, what does your social media, if you Google yourself, what, if anything, turns up? And is there anything there that you might be embarrassed about or need to explain in an interview if somebody's looked you up? So just a word of caution. I've told students before, if I was to look at your social media posts and there you are with a 5-foot bong, it might not be the fact that you were smoking pot, but it's about your judgment about posting a picture like that. So just a word to the wise. Mm-hmm. Melissa, do you have anything else that you want to, or Dwayne?
The one thing that I would add to adding those keywords into your resume, make sure that you can back that up. So if you're just going in to pick out words, it's likely that an employer is going to ask you to expand upon that because, oh, it sounds like you have some exposure or understanding to this, or tell me a little bit more about that. And you don't want to be caught in a position where you are talking about keywords or things that are specific to the agency, but can't actually back it up with experience. So do your homework as well.
Yeah, and I'll just say, one of the things that's different now than even a couple of years ago is your dream job may have been out of state and there was no virtual option. Mm-hmm. And there are many more positions that are either hybrid or completely remote that may have seemed inaccessible in the past. So looking, if you're looking for sometimes maybe jobs in social justice work at larger organizations that maybe your state doesn't have a chapter of, this may be an opportunity to find those positions that are out there. And as it relates to social media, you may not go directly dig in on who is going to be interviewing you, but you surely can check out the organizational social media. What are they putting out there? And, bring those sorts of things into your interview. If you are somebody who is a runner and your organization that you're applying for organizes fundraising 5Ks, that's a really good way to bring in a less formal topic into an interview. And it's really about is this fit, as the social worker who's going to be interviewed, you want to make sure it's right for you just as much as they want to make sure it's going to be right bringing you as a part of their team. And it may be pretty clear if you go through their social media, oh, maybe they need some help with this part of the job and it's not in the job description, but I have some pretty good social media skills. Maybe that's an enhanced skill that I would bring into whatever the position is too. And so, there are things that are maybe in your skill set or your wheelhouse that you're not even thinking about as part of a traditional job interview. But the more you do your research about the agency that you're applying for, you may see some of those gaps that they have in larger institutional parts of their organization that you could also bring into your interview, because it's always about how do you stand out from the 10 other applicants, right? If there are 10 people that were applying for the same job from your same school of social work, what makes you different from those other people, right? And it's mostly going to not just really be your internship. It's going to be those things that you do outside of your internship. What made you go into social work? Did you have a passion for social justice? Were you somebody who was brought up in the foster care system? You know, are you wanting to change policy level things? You know, all of those sorts of things can be really integral in terms of how you are received as a candidate and how you're going to relate to your potential employers going into that.
Right. Thank you, Dwayne. And that leads right into the interview. And remembering that they're interviewing you, you are also interviewing them. And right now, we definitely have a workforce shortage. Social workers are in high demand, but that doesn't mean that you just walk in and you're going to get the job. They need to make sure that you are the right fit for them. You need to find out that they're the right fit for you. But doing your research beforehand, look at their website, as Dwayne said, be able to go in knowing at least something about the agency that you're working for, and then be able to bring questions. I saw on your website that you do X, Y, and Z. How does this relate to that? Of course, you're going to use all of your best job interviewing skills, whether you are in person or on Zoom, which is interesting now, having interviews on Zoom, but it's definitely a thing. I will tell you my pet peeve when interviewing people, or and I'm going to try and put this gently, put your shoulders back and sit up straight. If you are if you roll your shoulders and hunch over, that just gives the impression of being, and I'm wondering how many of you just sat up straight in your chairs after my saying that. You want to project some confidence, because if you're going to be working with clients, they need to have confidence in you, meaning you need to have confidence in yourself. Fake it till you make it. Fake it till you believe it. But just being able to sit up straight is sometimes the first hurdle in that. Having that, especially if you are a new graduate, that you are humbly confident. You know that you have a lot to learn still, but you are confident that you can get there. And as Dwayne said, what do you bring to the table? Using your network, using your skills, using what sets you apart, and being able to share what you can bring to build the capacity of the agency. Thinking about your transferable skills. If you're interviewing at hospice and your last internship was at a school, it's like, that's pretty different, but it's all transferable skills. And if you're not sure how you make that leap, go back to your learning agreement. All of your learning agreement, no matter where you went to school, if it's a CSWE accredited program, everybody's got the same competencies. And so all of that, engaging with clients and communities, your assessment skills, your ability to put plans into action, your ability to evaluate practice, your ability to terminate with clients. All of those are transferable skills. So pull out that learning agreement and take a look at it to refresh your memory, so that when you're asked, you have, well, I have not done exactly this, but I have the skills from my internship, from my last job, that looked like this. If you want to become licensed, you want licensure supervision, ask who will be your supervisor. Is your potential supervisor there in the room interviewing you? If they say, oh, we'll provide supervision, I'd almost make that a condition of accepting the job, that you want to be able to talk with whoever your licensure supervisor is going to be. That's a pretty important relationship that will need to go on for 2 years. And you want to make sure that that's a right fit as well. Ask about supervision style, ask about how many supervisees they have on their caseload, and making sure that it's going to be a right fit. In thinking about salary, I can't tell you what an average salary is. It's different across the country, and it varies widely depending on your setting. But when you're told this is what we're able to offer as a salary, you have the right and the ability to negotiate. What does vacation or flex time look like? Is your job virtual or in person? Is there the possibility of doing hybrid if that's what you want? Health insurance, retirement, are they a place that will qualify for loan forgiveness, if that's something that you're looking for? Do they offer professional development opportunities? And then also looking at the culture. And this also really comes from, or can best come from, those who you've met who actually work there. Is it, you can bet your bottom dollar that any social service agency is going to be busy, but is it supportive? Is there attention to self-care? Is that, what does the culture look like? And then most agencies and organizations now have a diversity, equity, and inclusion plan, and at least on paper. Is it real? That's also what you want to really look into and ask questions about, if that's important to you in your job search. There, I've just talked a lot. Melissa, I'm sure you have things to add on.
Yeah. I think that being able to really embrace the idea that Lynn mentioned, or actually maybe it was Dwayne, that not only are you being interviewed, but you're interviewing the agency as well. It's okay to ask those questions and to ask for clarification. So if you don't see anything on the agency's website that you're applying for about social justice or diversity, equity, inclusion, ask some of those questions. What does that look like? Do they have a committee? Do they have a charter for that committee? What are some of the things that they're working on as an agency to improve access to clients, for example, or initiatives that they're actively working on? Those questions you can absolutely ask, and are important to understand the culture of the agency and what the agency looks like beyond what the website might say or what the clinical work might look like. I'm thinking about supervision as well. So if an agency has the opportunity to, or gives the opportunity to supervise or has licensure opportunities, you want to really know what that looks like. Yes, probably most social service agencies are going to be very busy. Caseloads are probably going to be very high, but what does that look like for your supervisor's availability? What does your agency or the agency that you're interviewing at look to do in the licensure process? Is it just, okay, we checked off 1 hour of supervision every week, back at it, or is there a full training program? So one of the things that, again, drew me to my agency when I was in grad school was that there was a full training program with a weekly seminar, weekly group supervision where all the members of the training program cohort, interns and resident therapists or candidates for licensure got together, discussed cases, had support, talked about theoretical interventions in depth beyond what we learned in our MSW programs, right? That was a major draw for me as my field work in my program had been in a different area. So those are the types of things you really want to have a sense of, not just the checkbox, yep, they offer licensure opportunities, for example.
Yeah, the other pieces that I would say are important to know up front, especially as a new social worker, is, what leadership opportunities are available, or what is the leadership ladder in this organization? Is it I'm going to be in just this one position, or is it every 6 months or a year I have an evaluation and then there's either a compensation change that's associated with that, or maybe there's an opportunity to move your position up. Some organizations, especially if you're working from like a state organization, they have usually levels or something like that. But if you're not, I think it really is helpful to know, is there going to be opportunities for me to grow? Am I able to use some of my time to participate in coalitions or committees that maybe you're personally invested in, or that the organization may have an interest in you being a part of? So much of social work is being social, right? And so much of our jobs, though, aren't really that social and are sometimes very insular to your organization, where the more people that you have an opportunity to meet outside of your organization, those coalitions, those advocacy partners, those are going to bring a lot of benefit to the whole system that you're a part of that maybe they're not even thinking about. Is there mentorship? Is that supervision, or is that something different? And then, the other thing to be thinking about is, especially if you're in kind of a hybrid or a remote job, if you're traveling, do they reimburse travel costs? Are cell phone bills reimbursed? Are internet bills reimbursed? These are some of the things that really weren't social work conversations until the last couple of years in the larger sense, but it's important to be asking about those now. And I will just go back to one of the things that's on this list that Lynn mentioned, is loan forgiveness. If you're a social worker, like most of us that have student loans, do you need to be in an organization that qualifies for loan forgiveness? Because not every organization does, and not every nonprofit does. And so that's something that you want to be clear of before you accept a job, if that is a key piece for you. One of my questions to Lynn and Melissa, though, is what if, and I know every state's a little bit different about how this operates, if there is no salary posted for a position and you have an interview, when is the appropriate time to ask about that? Or what are your thoughts about appropriate timing?
Melissa, you want to try that first?
Yeah. I think that is the topic that I think both employers and prospective employees dance around. Should I ask this? Should I bring this up? Is it something that I should ask about right now? Am I going to sound like I'm asking for too much? The number one thing that I can say as a social worker from the perspective of both a employer and a prospective employee is advocate for yourself, right? So it is okay to ask those questions. And I think during the interview process, if it is not posted, you want to know what you're looking at. There are a lot of positions out there that you get an offer and then are told what the salary range is. And that makes it really difficult, especially if you are, say, for example, just out of school, trying to find a job and maybe interviewing at a few different places. So being able to ask those questions, the prospective employer may say, we'll get to that, or it is this range, which can be, we can give you more details about later on in the process. Sure, that's a risk, but better to know that than to have that question mark just hanging there. Should I ask? Do I need to wait until a certain point? It doesn't hurt to ask those questions because it is a really important part of employment. We are social workers. We work in the social service field, but it is our field of employment, and the financial aspect is something that we need to consider when we're taking or considering different jobs.
And I would just say to everybody here, make sure you negotiate. Like, usually employers aren't going to give you the top number right off the bat. And what we know, historically is women are much less likely to negotiate a salary. Social work is predominantly women. First-time job appliers are less likely to negotiate. And so that may be a lot of folks that are on this call, but take that opportunity. This is where doing your research ahead of time and knowing what the landscape is for that particular job in your state or your region looks like. You can kind of get a sense if sometimes, depending on what the organization is, you can go on places like GuideStar and find financial information for an organization, or like we've been talking about, who is your network? Do you know somebody who works there? They may be able to give you a rough estimate of what you can expect in that sort of position. And it may not be worth interviewing if it's too low. And that's just a reality of some positions. And you don't necessarily want to waste your time if it's not going to be a position that's worth it for you in the end.
Unless you want to practice interviewing.
Yeah, and I see the comment in the chat box from Samaya is, I've asked about salary and never got an answer. I usually got, well, we'll tell you upon hire, and go all the way through and then having to turn job to job. I mean, that sort of answer may give you a sense of what the culture is of the organization right up front anyway.
Yeah.
If they're being hesitant about some of that salary information. And I think culturally we're at a place too where salary information is much more transparent than probably it has been in a long time. Some agencies still have a ways to go on that, but I've heard that too. So yeah, that's an unfortunate reality of that.
Yeah, I mean, and it's something that you need to juggle, right? If it's a job that you really want because of whatever reason, it's the experience that you really want to get. You really like the people who work there. That's the demographic you really. Then right, you're gonna that might tilt the scales a little ways. Like, okay, I'd be making less money. However, I'd be getting this experience and know that I'd be able to move up in the organization pretty quickly, or get these experiences that I want. But yeah, I'd be cautious of an agency that hedges when it comes to salary. If an agency is proud of the salary that they're able to offer, they're going to let you know. If they are embarrassed about the salary that they are able to offer, they might hedge and hope to get you in with, this would be the great experience that you'd want.
And it's not, at the end of the day, all about the salary number. Sometimes if all of the fringe is awesome, like if they pay for part of your student loans every year, if they pay for your licensure process, if they'll pay for your membership fees, sometimes that can help offset a little bit, at least of what the salary line is. But the other thing that I would recommend, especially for new folks, clinical folks who are going into positions, asking, is there a compensation adjustment once I get my full license? Yeah. And is that in writing somewhere? So when it happens, you actually get that bump, and making sure that it's in writing when either you sign your contract or you've seen the policy where that's written out, because that's also something that you want to consider. If they support you, they provide you supervision, they reimburse your licensure process, and then you get a bump. That's definitely a retention strategy for an organization and a good marker of a lot of places that are hiring social workers.
Yeah. Also, if you are covered under your partner's or somebody else's health insurance, you should definitely ask for more money in your salary, because that's a huge cost to the agency. Also, that retirement, if they say we do matching, you put so much into your retirement and we'll match up to this amount, that's a pretty great benefit as well. And if you take that job, one you should not turn down. Anything else, Melissa?
There's some good comments in the chat, but we'll maybe save those for a little bit later.
Yeah, we're in the down. We're coming in, so.
Okay, so we touched on some of these talking about the interview process, but realistically, there have been a lot of changes that have come because of COVID. There is such a need right now for social workers in all different capacities. And in some ways that may allow you some benefits or some opportunity for bargaining. That being said, there are some agencies, my agency included, that are nonprofit agencies and maybe can't offer a competitive salary with this agency over here who has a $20,000 signing bonus. Go check out that agency if that's really appealing. That might be something to look at. But are the things that might not be financial, things that would draw you to the agency. And again, using your advocacy and the fact that you've got some bargaining possibilities or opportunities. One of the things that I think is really important to consider with that is, because there's such a high need, because there may be some opportunity to bargain, when you get into a job, it's probably going to be a pretty hefty caseload, or a lot of either a lot of hours or expectations around productivity. You want to really have a good sense of what that's going to look like, because it may be different from somebody who maybe that's been in the organization for X number of years, because COVID really has changed things. The other thing that I think is really important to consider when it comes to COVID is, not only are there some work from home or online hybrid opportunities, that's happening with interviews a lot as well. So for interviews that are being held online or virtually, you want to make sure that you're still treating it exactly like you would treat a interview that is in person. You want to put your best foot forward. You want to be professional. You want to be aware of how you're going to be perceived. So yes, you may have a great resume and you may be really showing your skill set, but if there is if you're walking around holding your phone in your Zoom interview, that's not going to look very professional. In fact, my suggestion would be, if it's at all possible and you have a Zoom interview, attend it from your computer. Attend it where your computer is in front of you. You don't have to adjust it. Maybe you have to move your screen a little bit, but you're not walking around with your phone, so all the background is changing. You want to look prepared, and you want to be able to really attend to what's going on in the interview and not have distractions.
Melissa, it sounds like you're speaking from experience there.
Yeah, a lot of experience. The number of interviews that we've had where folks are just not really thinking about that, or are so casual or laid back because, hey, I'm at home. Yeah, those things do send messages, right? Sometimes there's a cat that walks by. That happens. I think we're all used to seeing cat butts and hearing dogs in the background, right? And that's okay. That is real life. You want to know the agency that you're applying or interviewing with, so that you get a sense of what is expected, but still maintain your professionalism. Another speaking from experience tip that I have, if you have an online interview, please make sure that you sign out of your meeting before you stand up, and you are on camera with your beautiful top and your hair done and your bright pink fuzzy PJ pants, right? It's no surprise that a lot of people are able to attend Zoom meetings and have the business on the top, party below, I guess, kind of thing, but you still want to be professional. You want to be showing up and showing that you're prepared, and you don't want to be caught surprised in that way. And then the other thing regarding kind of etiquette, I think is related to the idea, if you're offered a job but you're not ready, maybe you're applying to a lot of different jobs. Maybe you're finding that a lot of people are offering jobs because, again, there's such a high need. It's really, really important to be professional, even if you decide you don't want a job. So it's really important to be connected, to network. You don't want somebody to hear through the grapevine that you were offered a job at this agency and you just no-showed, no communication on the first day. That does not look good. It doesn't portray anything good. And I wish that I was just saying that, hey, food for thought, but I've experienced that as well as an employer. Fortunately, it wasn't a social worker, but still important to kind of keep some of that etiquette in mind, even though there are a lot of things that are online or virtual right now. Lynn, do you have anything, or Dwayne, do you have anything to add to that?
I have one thing to add, and it may sound old-fashioned, but thank you notes are still a thing. Even if you're not pulling out the card and the envelope and the stamp, a follow-up email thanking the people who interviewed you for their time. You now have the ability to re-express your interest in the job, something that you found exciting or new or energizing about that interview. It does not need to be long, but I think it does go a long way to demonstrate the type of thoughtful person, the thoughtful social worker that you are in your attention to those details.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Especially if an employer's having lots of interviews, sometimes the thank you note will be the one thing that sets you apart, especially if there's a lot of very similar candidates. Melissa, I did not know you could see my pink fuzzy boxers right now, so thank you for mentioning that. The other thing that I would just say, though, is if you're having a Zoom interview or a virtual interview, also make sure your name is correct. Because that also sometimes happens if you're using somebody else's computer. So make sure that is synced when you sign on to your meeting. And if you've got a name that maybe is harder to pronounce, feel free to, when you introduce yourself, or, most of you who have harder names sometimes know you can put it in your in the captioning as well. Like my last name and Melissa's, we were just talking about this, like there's a few different ways that people say this to us, but that follow-up can be really important. The only other thing I wanted to add about COVID, and what I've been hearing from several employers, at least in Michigan, is that they're seeing a larger number of candidates just ghost the interview. And I would just like to highly recommend that none of you ghost your interviews. If you, for whatever reason, get to the point where you're like, you know what, this job isn't right for me, that courtesy email just saying, hey, I'm no longer interested in this position, or I found something else. Thank you for your time. That's really good enough. But social work is a smaller community than you think it is. And if you're one of those people that puts like a toxic thing like that out there, it will spread. And so you just don't want to leave that bad taste in an employer's mouth, because you never know, 5 years from now, you could be wanting a job at that organization and it's the same hiring person. And they'll be like, you know what, I think I remember that person and they just didn't show up for their interview. And so I just wanted to mention that is a little bit different than at least what I'm hearing from our employers in Michigan, kind of in this next phase of whatever pandemic time we're in right now.
Okay, and then final slide before questions. Once you're hired, again, going back to the say yes. You're in a new place with new opportunities. Say yes to the new opportunities. This is a continuation of building your network, whether it's for your own employment or to build resources, information, a network that's going to benefit your clients, right? You become a better clinician when you are connected to the services and systems that your clients are connected to. And this is the time you have coming into a job, a scope of practice. This is your chance to build your scope of practice. That's also something to ask your potential licensure supervision. What is their scope of practice? What are they going to be able to share and teach you so that you can build your scope of practice? And then the top bullet, give it a year, right? See how it is. It may be the absolute place for you. It may not. And even if in this time of workforce shortage and people, organizations and agencies really needing people, and unless you've got a really good reason why you left an agency after 4 or 5 months, it's something that's going to be on your resume or part of your work history for a long time. My recommendation is give it a year. And Dwayne, Melissa, anything you want to add on that?
One thing I would add is bring in your connections and what you learn from your NASW involvement into your job, because that matters. That can really help an organization. It also makes you really valuable. Being that that connection can be really helpful, especially if you're working at an organization that maybe is multidisciplinary or has a lot of different people. Making sure social work and all that is coming from the field of social work is your agency is up to date with all of that will be really helpful as well.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa, for saying it, because one of the things I did want to say is there are very few organizations where it's all social workers, right? You're most likely going to be in a milieu where you are one of a couple or a few social workers, or you are the only social worker. Do not forget that they hired a social worker for a reason. Do not lose your social workeriness in amongst the doctors, the nurses, the teachers, the school administrators, the psychologists, the whatever group you're with. You are there for a reason. Don't ever lose your social work mission and values. Don't let it be swallowed up by the mission and values of other professions. You're there for a reason, because the social work mission and values are needed and necessary within that organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And this goes back to like what we talked about very first and foremost, like what is your network? Especially if you're in an organization where you are the lone social worker. You know, if you're going into private practice, like private's the first word of that job, right? You may not be around a lot of people, or if you're a school social worker or a hospital social worker, a lot of times we aren't surrounded by other of us, right? And so how are you staying connected with the social work community if you are in one of those positions? You know, how are you hearing about updates to practice, things that are changing at your licensure level or around continuing education in your state? How are you keeping abreast of best practices in your particular area of social work, right? And that's where, you know, whether it's NASW, you know, we would obviously love it if you become a member of NASW for those of you who aren't, but what is that network for you that's going to be the most valuable to stay connected to? Because while you're a student, most of you are getting lots of emails from your social work program, you're building your network through your faculty and your internships, but some of those are going to go away pretty quickly after you graduate, especially if you move to a different region or a different state. Then you're going to have to kind of restart and build all those connections from scratch. And so the more now that you can start to get people, you know, I added Dwayne on LinkedIn during this meeting, so at least I know somebody in Michigan if I absolutely needed something. You know, that's what we all want to be, a resource for each other. And the more that we can help each other out, I think the stronger we will be as a field. And then just the other thing that Lynn mentioned about, you know, give it a year. You know, if you're in a toxic environment, don't stay for a year, right? Because there are opportunities for you to explain why you weren't in a situation, and that may give you some good things of what you want your next job to be. You know, my supervisor wasn't great. I needed this. And so the next job you look for, you're going to have more of a laundry list of the specific items that you want into that particular position. And And the other piece that I will just say from my perspective is, as a new hire, you are also still an ethical, if you're a licensed professional, you then have to, if you're in a situation where your organization is practicing unethically or your supervisor is practicing unethically, you can also file complaints against folks. And I know that's not the purpose of this particular, but we all have to hold each other accountable in this field. And new professionals often have some really strong ethics as well. And if there's somebody who's doing something really bad at the practice you join, don't just let it slide. Go to a manager, go to another supervisor. And then if there isn't guidance from that end, call your NASW chapter and say, hey, I'm in this situation. I'm not sure exactly what I should be doing. Is this something I should report to my state? Is this just something I have to deal with within my organization? But we want to be able to help each other and, make social work practice as strong as it can be. And sometimes as new folks into the field, you're going to be put in places where you're like, this doesn't feel quite right. And usually that inclination is right in your gut. And so that's where good supervision can be really critical in terms of processing that. But then if you don't have good supervision, where else are you processing those feelings, right? And so that's, again, that network is really critical.
Okay, now, whoa, that's a bright screen. Questions. And I'm gonna stop the share because I don't think we need the questions slide to remind us that we're asking the questions.
Feel free for folks to type into the chat, or if you want to use the raise your hand feature, we'll call on folks. But the first question kind of goes back to one of our initial conversations in building your connections and your networks. How often should folks be following up with new contacts, especially if they're doing informational interviewing? And how often should folks be following up with old contacts? So say you're a student and you just got out of your internship, should you stay in contact with your field site? And how and what benefit may it be to continue those relationships post-graduation?
I would say that really depends on your experience and the goals that you have. I mean, I think it's always helpful to keep connections. That's networking, right? To keep in contact with former fieldwork or internship opportunity, but how much you keep in contact, I think, really depends on some of your experiences working for that agency. Is it something that is it a place where you want to work in the future? Absolutely. Keep in contact and let them know that too. Is it something that you expect to maybe have some collateral contact with in the future? Definitely keep up those connections or those relationships.
Yeah, and if you're wondering, it's like, okay, that might be an awkward email. How do I do that? You can write that thank you email. I'm graduating now, and I just really want to thank you for the experience that you gave me at my first year internship. I feel ready to go out into the world. Ask them, would it be okay to put you down as a reference? Right? And then whatever you get, maybe you'll get that email back saying, oh, we have a job opening right here if you're interested in applying. If the place where you're doing your internship right now and you're graduated, if you'd really kind of like to work there, have that conversation with your supervisor. There's a lot of benefit for organizations to hire their interns, and many do, because you're a known quantity and you already have a pretty good understanding of the organization. Does that answer the question, or do we miss anything, Ray?
No, I think so. The only other thing I would add to that is, like, you never know when you may need a past supervisor's recommendation. So like, I've had students come back to me like 9 years after they were my intern. And if I haven't talked with you in 9 years, I don't really remember what you were like as an intern, to be honest. Like, there's been 30 more since you, right? And so it's like, if that relationship isn't solid anymore. So if you at least have, once a year, I'm going to check in with this person because, I may want to hear what they're doing, or I may want to let them know that, hey, this is where I'm at now. And not wait until, hey, I'm applying for jobs. Can I still use you as a reference all these years later? So that at least thread of communication can be helpful to just check in every once in a while with your folks who are on that. You know, one of the exercise I think can be really important for all social workers to do is basically you create a pie for yourself, like a pie chart, and it's your personal board of directors. And so each slice of the pie is what is a critical component of your life and your professional career. So you may have like your financial person, you may have your professional mentor, you may have a faith person, somebody who maybe is part of your social circle, but what is missing in your puzzle right now? And sometimes that is really helpful in terms of figuring out, okay, that social network that I have, maybe that person can guide me in this area right now, and I'll have more of a complete puzzle as I'm building my social work career. And that pie will change throughout your career depending on what stages that you're at or what you're focused on right at the moment. But I think for me, it's helpful to have kind of a visual representation of, okay, this is where I'm at in my career. These are the things that are important to me in my life right now. Where is there a gap area? And who do I know that may be willing to invest some time with me in building that area up? So that's just one cool exercise that I've done in a couple of groups before.
And I'm a strong believer in grabbing coffee, going out for breakfast. I mean, right, it's all around food or lunch. Can I take you out for coffee so I can pick your brain about this? What a great way to reconnect and
that goes right into kind of another question from our audience. So what kind of thoughts do you all have for somebody who's been at their internship for 2 years for both their BSW and their MSW, and upon approaching graduation, they did encourage me to speak with them about a position. However, I'm debating, should I expand beyond my internship?
I wonder what the risk is of speaking to someone, getting some information, that sort of informational interview, prospective employment type of meeting, while also exploring other things, right? So I think that it could be really helpful to figure out what are some of your future goals? What are some of the things that you want? Can your current placement offer you that? And if not, what are the gaps? Where would you like to look? Could it hurt to look at other places while also have that meeting to kind of figure out, is this where I want to be? I think that you don't have to necessarily decide right this moment, I'm going to have this meeting, so I'm not going to look elsewhere. You can still try to figure out what you want and what your career goals are, or what's next for you, while entertaining getting more information from that contact at your placement.
I agree. And really having a honest discussion with yourself about, is that where you really want to be? Or is it, it's a bird in the hand, I've got this, I feel comfortable here. And I mean, there's definitely benefits to knowing your agency, feeling comfortable there, knowing that you have a degree of competency. But if that's not what you really want to be doing, then like Melissa said, look at other things. There's a whole world out there.
I'll also add to that, thinking about some of those fringe benefits will be really helpful too, right? So there may be things that really draw you to staying. For example, maybe it's a position that you have some grant opportunity with, and a portion of your student loans will be paid for if you stay on for X, Y, or Z, right? If it's a toxic work environment, if you feel like you don't have licensure opportunities and that's what you want, if you feel like you're kind of pausing just so you have that one benefit of, say, student loan, money towards your student loans, it's really important to just be able to ask yourself, how important is that? Is that worth some of the other things that you're going to be missing out on if you stay there just for that one benefit?
And it's always a good idea to shop around, right? Like, even if you're super content with your job, it doesn't hurt to see what's out there. Because if you're at an organization now as an intern and they want to bring you in, hopefully you've had a good experience there. And if you're even contemplating it, I'm guessing you've probably had a pretty good experience there. But if they offer you a position and you don't have any other options out there, you're maybe less willing to negotiate. And if, say, you have 3 or 4 jobs that you're considering, or maybe even a couple of offers, you can use that in an interview. I've got another option on the table. This is the salary amount that they're offering me. Would you be able to match that? Right? Especially if that number is lower. And that goes back to kind of that negotiation piece that we talked about. If you know what that minimum level is that you want to take as a starting salary, but then you have another job that is already in line that may be a little bit higher than that, you may be able to bring that back to your supervisor at your current internship and say, hey, this is just where I'm at right now. I am interested in potentially staying here, but I would like to be at least at this salary amount.
Yeah.
Great.
I'll also, Dwayne, can I just put in
Yeah.
at the risk of like serious gender stereotyping, but stereotypically, men will look at the job responsibilities or the requirements and find one thing that they can do and apply for the job. Stereotypically, women will look at that same list, find one thing that they can't do and not apply. And what I try to encourage people to do when you're looking at job descriptions and requirements, remember that it's a wish list. That organization is probably not going to get everything on their wish list. And that should not deter you from applying for it anyway. Oh, it says that you need to be licensed. That's their wish. You'll be licensed in 2 years. Are they willing to take you on and provide licensure supervision so you can get licensed? They want you to have 3 to 5 years of experience doing bibbity bobbity boo. Maybe you don't have that, but you have transferable skills that you can talk about. So remember, it's a wish list.
Yeah, that's great advice. And that goes in kind of perfectly into another question that came through, is how do you navigate different timelines employers have? So especially if you're applying for different positions at different organizations, some employers ask us to respond ASAP, but you're still waiting to hear from other employers. How do you kind of navigate that?
Be honest with them and say, I'm entertaining several different job offers at this time. I can get back to you. And when you know that you're supposed to hear from another organization within the next 2 days, say, can I get back to you in 3 days at the end of the week, Monday, whatever time you need. If they say, no, we need to know right now. Well, first of all, I doubt very much that they really need to know right now. They might like to, but they probably don't need to. Then unless you really want that job, you can say, well, thank you, but no.
Yeah, great. So moving into, once somebody gets into a position, what advice would either of you have for setting boundaries when it comes to hours?
I think it starts in the interview. You want to know what the expectations are for you when it comes to hours. So you may be in a position that it's 9 to 5. You want to know that. You may be in a position where you have X number of clients and you have some autonomy in your schedule. You want to know that. There may be some expectations about nights or weekend work. You want to know all of that. So if not in the interview process, then certainly when you have the job offer, you want to get a clear picture of what that's going to be. And if you're already in a position and trying to figure out how to set some of those boundaries, I think it's really important to advocate for you and to also work with a supervisor, a manager, whomever kind of makes those decisions, to figure out what the expectations are and how you can meet them within reason, right? So if you're being asked to work 50 hours a week, are you being compensated with overtime, right? That's a lot of hours. Or you're being asked to work 40 clinical hours and then you have an extra 10 hours of documentation. That's really important to know and to also advocate for yourself. And a lot of employers, especially with the need that's out there, that is one of those things that might be a little bit more flexible. I'm available for these 40 hours and I have therapy at 4 p.m. every Tuesday. Can you advocate for that? Absolutely, give it a shot. You don't know until you try, but I think it really is important to put that out there and to try to uphold some of those really important boundaries and work-life balance where you can.
Yeah, and I would just add, what's important for you in a job, right? Is flexibility of schedule. Do you have kids that you're going to need to pick up from school to take to practice? Are you participating in some sort of an ensemble or athletic group that you need a certain time blocked off to commit to that? That stuff, some of it may change in your life where you're not going to know in an interview process. But some of it you can really get up front. And again, like if you know somebody who works there, they can tell you, oh yeah, you're only going to be working when you're scheduled to work. Or yeah, you're going to have a lot of extra hours. Those weekends that they said that you weren't going to be working on, yeah, you're probably going to have a few of those. Or those evening things, yeah, you're going to have a couple of those. And so that insider knowledge can be so critical early on in finding a job.
Not to mention some of those extras like, you're supposed to be on call every couple of months. Okay, so what does that look like? What are the hour requirements there? Does that flex your time if you get a call in the middle of the night, for example?
Yeah. So Heidi asked somewhat of a follow-up question. So is it a concern if it takes considerably longer for an organization to get back to you after the interview than they said they would? And what is the appropriate follow-up for a social worker if you're kind of in that waiting limbo post the date that the organization said that they would respond?
Yeah, I think that if that's the job that you want, then following up with an email a day or two after the day that they said that they would be in contact is completely fine. It highlights the fact that you are interested and reminds them that you're kind of out there waiting. Keep in mind that because of workforce shortages, just like when you go into a restaurant now and there's one server with twice as many tables as they should have, your potential employer is in the same situation. Their workload is incredibly busy and maybe you're the thing that fell off their plate this week. So a little bit of grace. They might have other people that they're interviewing. They may have be delayed in that. You don't know. It would have been nice if they had sent you an email saying, hey, we know that you're there and we'll get to you in a few days. But the reality is that might not happen. So I think following up a few days after what they said they would is fine. And go from there.
Yeah, and the follow-up question is, what if they didn't give you a date?
Yeah, I saw that question come in. I think that it's appropriate, and every employer is going to be a little bit different in what their timeline is, who they're interviewing, et cetera. But if it's a job that you're really interested in, I don't think it's unreasonable to a week after your interview say, hey, I just wanted to follow up and see, to find out what the timeline might be. It's a good idea to ask that question at the end of your interview. What does your timeline look like? When are you looking to hire? When might I hear back from you? But if that didn't come up, if you forgot to ask, from an employer standpoint, I would be more than happy if somebody said, hey, just checking in. It might be, oh my goodness, I am so sorry that I didn't give you that timeline. We are looking to make a decision in the next week and I'll get back to you by then, right?
Yeah, and that's an appropriate question to ask at the end of the interview. What is your all timeline for hiring? When should I expect to hear something? Or when would you like me to follow back up? That's also okay to ask, because you want to know, especially if the interview went well. If it didn't go well, then you may be like, yeah, no, not interested in this job. So I don't really care if they follow up with me or not. Another question. Okay, would it be okay to ask about the racial diversity to a potential employer during an interview? And what are some ways to deal with racial discrimination during the interview process? Great question.
I think it's an appropriate question to ask that you might put into that. So what does diversity, equity, and inclusion look like at your agency? That gives them an opportunity to either brag, right? Oh, look at us, or say, this is an area where we're really trying to improve, and then how you might fit in to that picture. As far as discrimination goes, remember, there are certain things that people can't ask you. But of course, then there are things that they can't ask you, but because you are there in person, they're going to know. Like, if you are visibly pregnant, they probably are going to guess that you're going to have a child, right? Or have children. If you wear a wedding band, they're going to make assumptions about your marital status. If you have skin, people are going to make assumptions about your racial or ethnic background. So I would say you use what you have, who you are, as your advantage, right? What do you bring to the table? And then you weave that into your interview about what it is that makes you the best candidate for their organization.
I would also add to that might be an opportunity to explore what the agency culture is around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So an appropriate question might be, how does the agency deal with microaggressions as they come up? Or what initiatives has this agency taken to confront issues of discrimination or missed opportunities when it comes to inclusion? What does access look like for clients and for staff? Those types of things are all really appropriate questions to ask when you're trying to figure out if this agency is the type of agency that you're working for, and if they're prioritizing some of those very important things.
Yeah, and I think with that comment too, racism exists in our circles of social work, in our hiring practices. Sexism exists in our hiring practices. Like, we're not immune from that as much as we wish and we think ethically we should be. And so I think that those questions that both Melissa and Lynn said, are really critical. It's like, how are all of our work spaces trying to be better continually? And that is also a great question for those of you who are still in your internships, to make sure you're asking in your current internships, if you're not already asking those questions, because you're probably seeing it in real time, right? If there are microaggressions at your workplace, you see that, right? And I think that question that Melissa, or that how are they addressed? How is this addressed? And if you go to an organization's website and you see that their whole employer, all of their employees are white, doesn't necessarily mean that they're a racist organization. They may be doing some wonderful things, but how is that manifested into who they're hiring into their practice, right? And some of our organizations are teeny tiny, so you may only have 2 staff. And so sometimes that's just the reality of the work that we're in. But I think that those conversations about race, sometimes going back to, what does anti-racism work look like at this organization? And what's specifically important to you as a future employee in joining a practice? Because, what happens, and this is a situation that we had recently in Michigan, is what happens if you have a client who is openly racist with you as a new social worker in the field, and you go to your supervisor and they do not help you address the situation. That is definitely a microaggression from your supervisor and talks a little bit more to probably the systemic culture of the organization that you're working for. And so it's really sometimes hard to know that in an interview process or get at that if you don't know anybody who works there. But if you do, again, going back to that larger social circle, asking those folks who are in there already, like, what have you seen? What is it really like here? Is this going to be a safe environment for me to work at or be my authentic self when I come into the workspace? All right. Question from Lynette. I always struggle with times when something is not working out or seems like it's not the right fit. I've heard that it's common for social workers to change jobs frequently. What advice do you have for graceful exits so that we can maintain our reputation and marketability?
I think being honest about what is not working in a professional way is important. I think timeline in when you might be exiting is important to that too, right? Like, so if context is important as well, right? So if somebody is saying, you know what, I am just too stressed out, I can't do this, or there is this conflict, or there's something better over here, and say I'll be gone next week, it's not going to be very graceful or professional either. So I think that it is okay to, the theme, maybe my middle name might be like advocate for yourself, right? Just being able to say, this is really what I'm looking for. Thank you for this opportunity. And I have an opportunity to really focus on this area, which is a special interest area for me. In fact, we had something similar to that type of situation happen within my organization a few years ago. We had a resident therapist who came here, and she was going to be completing her licensure here in New Hampshire. Specifically the area that our organization is located. We have a higher refugee population than in other parts of the state, but she got a job offer in Boston, which she had the ability to use her multilingual skills with clients. And that was a really appropriate move for her because she was multilingual. She wanted to work with this population, and she had more opportunity than what our organization could give her just in clients in this area. So I think that being able to be professional, give an appropriate timeline, and also give some context to why you're leaving is helpful. And I think that it's really helpful. It's a good sign from an organization if they also do an exit interview. That way they know they are able to take some constructive feedback if it's something about the organization itself or the people there that contributed to you leaving, because workforce development, retention is really important for from an organizational standpoint.
And if it's something within you, if you like where you're working, but you're not getting what it is that you want, ask for it, right? If there's the opportunity, it's like, I really like what I'm doing. I really like this organization, but I really want to expand my scope of practice into this. Can you help me with this? Can this be part of I want to be able to do more work within the community. I want to sit on a task force that's addressing this issue along with doing my clinical responsibilities. It's at least worth the conversation with your supervisor or your manager to say, I'd really like to stay here, but this is something that I need. Or look, my life has just changed and I'm willing to work 40 hours, but I really need Fridays off. Or I need Mondays off. That's what I'd want, is Mondays off. Can you work with me with this? Ask the question.
Yeah, and what Lynn said early on too is when you say yes to things, sometimes that will present other opportunities that you never even thought were possible. And so that's sometimes where that job transition may happen. You may say yes to something at your current job, and then uh-oh, I've been on a panel, and then someone on that panel offered me this other thing that's like pretty awesome, and I may not be able to say no to it. What do? I'm pretty new to this organization, but I don't think I can pass this sort of thing up. And that's where sometimes saying yes can put you into that little bit of a conundrum, but you got to follow your gut. And I think that's where that honest flow of communication can be really important with your supervisor, is like, this came up based off of this experience you all provided me. And I don't have any bad feelings about the organization. I want to help recruit somebody into this position that I'm filling, but I need to move into this new position that I found.
Yeah.
Well, I think we have time for one more question. And I see the question, yes, we are recording it, and we'll have this up sometime probably next week on the national website. So be on the lookout from that on the student page. So one question that came in earlier too is, and Melissa, this may be a good question for you. For social workers thinking about going into a group practice setting right out of graduation, what are your advice for those folks?
What are the expectations you're going to, what are the expectations for you as a new grad? What are your opportunities to move up? Can the organization help with licensure, or is the position that you might be applying for a non-licensed position? What are the benefits of getting licensed in that organization? What are the client opportunities that you might be able to have in a role as a new grad versus somebody who's licensed? Really kind of understanding what happens after graduation and what is the process to get to where you want to be. There are some orgs that you can work as a unlicensed clinician indefinitely. Community mental health center type settings. I don't know if that is across the country, but certainly in the New England area, you could work as an unlicensed clinician. But if you've got licensure opportunity, that usually comes with a bump in pay, opportunities for supervision later, growth opportunities within your role or position at the agency, right? All of those are really important things to ask and have a good sense of when you're looking at continuing in that capacity.
Great advice. All right, well, we are almost at our time for today. So I want to give the two of you any last pieces of wisdom for our audience today.
I want to mirror something that Lynn said. Social workers are amazing. And we know so much and we offer so much. We are assets to any organization. Hold on to that, because that is so, so important. There are lots of allied professionals. There are lots of people that we will work alongside who are not social workers, and they are fantastic in their own ways. But we have something special as social workers, and I would really encourage everyone to embrace that. And thank you, Lynn, for that. Really, the way that you said that, I think, was really well received by me, and a good reminder just kind of in general, because we kind of have a superpower. Our superpower is that we're social workers, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We're the ones who look at clients and communities wearing bifocals, right? We're able to see the client in front of us, what's right close up. We're also able to see the systems, the systems that are both provide opportunities and barriers to our clients. We see both at the same time and don't discount one for the other. So, and that's a pretty unique perspective. Don't ever lose sight of it. And if bring that to your job, bring that to your interview, bring that to your work, because it is what makes social workers and why we are so important in organizations. And then finally, say yes, figure it out later.
Love it. Well, thank you both so much for your time today and your expertise. I see some really wonderful comments into the chat. Thank you, folks, for participating in this. We are planning our next series will be in July. That one will be focused on liability and ethical concerns for new professionals and students. We should have that registration open in the next week or so if you're interested in attending that. But we really want to thank you all for being here. For those of you who just graduated or graduating soon, congratulations and welcome to the
congratulations.
field. We're so excited to have you joining us. And please stay connected. You know, NASW, we are nothing without the folks on the ground. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your successes and your challenges and figure out how do we create better social work all across the US. So thank you all. Have a good rest of your night, and I'll hopefully see you soon.
Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you so much. Thank you.